Welcome, fools. I'm your host, Tim Byers, and I have a couple of special guests here today. Really pleased to have Denise Pearson and Chris Degnan of Snowflake. Chris, formerly of Snowflake. Denise, still at Snowflake. Chris, the former. You're the founding Chief Revenue Officer of Snowflake, and Denise, the Chief Marketing Officer. And you've written a book. Hopefully I can hold this up and we could see it here, Make It Snow. From zero to billions, how Snowflake scaled to its go-to-market organization. And it really is a remarkable story of the work that you did together. Am I right, both of you, that Snowflake was fastest to $1 billion among SaaS companies in terms of scale? Is that right? Is it the fastest that's ever been? So let's talk about that. Like, if that is what happened, give me the short answer for how that happened, and we'll get into it. And maybe I'll start with you, Chris, because you're shaking your head here vigorously, and I imagine you want to take some pride in that.
Yeah, certainly it's a team effort, first of all. But I think one of the things that Snowflake we were lucky to be a part of is that we had an amazing product, or still is an amazing product, and it's a giant market. So I think one of the things I give people advice on is when you're looking for career choices, make sure that you're working at a company that has a huge market opportunity, and that's really was the neat part. So it was a giant market that we were chasing. We built a world-class go-to-market team between sales and marketing, and we had an amazing product. So those three things combined were just the magic that got us to this crazy growth. Now, I'm certain in the AI world, it's going to be broken, but nonetheless, it's something that we're very proud of what we were a part of.
We'll come on to that. We'll come on to the AI portion of it. But Denise, take me back to scaling this from the beginning. I mean, marketing is hard in the best of circumstances. What was the main challenge here, scaling at such an extraordinary rate?
Well, I joined in May 2016, so yeah, exactly about 10 years ago. And in the early days, right, there were two things, right? First of all, just building awareness and credibility for Snowflake in the market, right? That's the biggest challenge you have as a startup, right? And also for us, we were asking companies to put their most valuable asset into a company that they've never heard of, right? You need to kind of trust, right, the vendor you're going to work with here. Sure. So one part was about really building trust, credibility. And the second part was really around building the demand gen engine, right, for Chris, sales organization. So those are the two things we focused on in parallel. And we took a very educational approach, right? It was everything from talking about security in the cloud, how to migrate to the cloud, really kind of these topics that people really cared about them. So we didn't really put the product first. It wasn't like selling the product. We're really more addressing kind of the main issues that customers had back then. And remember, right, 2016, this was the early days, for the cloud, right? It's kind of where we are today, with AI. So a lot of education was needed at that time, and really for us, putting ourselves in our customers' shoes and really understanding, okay, what do they need now from an education standpoint, advice and product.
Yeah, in the book, and Chris, you talked about this early on. I want to come on to the process of, as you guys did this, but since you brought this up, Denise, I think it's important. You mentioned this as it was like selling religion. I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because that sounds pretty interesting. I mean, how does that process work? I would imagine it's going to be similar, like selling religion again in the AI era. But I sometimes talk about this with members, that I'm looking for companies that are solving a migraine level problem, because you can kind of get through a headache, but man, you'll pay anything well, maybe not anything, but you'll pay a lot to get relief from a migraine. So talk to me about this, Chris. What do you mean when you say this, in the early stages, it's like selling a religion?
Yeah, well, look, the thing that was not obvious back in when I started in 2013, 2014, was that the cloud, that everyone was going to the cloud. So like, there's classic examples of like, me going on sales calls with our founders, and one of our founders, Benoit Dageville, we were at like a premier investment bank, and they were saying, "Wow, we love what you built. When are you going to go to the private cloud?" Because they wanted us to deploy Snowflake into their private cloud, and Benoit was like Master Yoda, saying, "Hey, listen, you're going to go to the public cloud ever before we go to the private cloud," and he was right, because they became a huge customer of ours. And really the hard part on the religion side is, I come from a background of following a certain sales process called MEDIC. And in MEDIC, you have to develop champions. And, you have to remember, when we were going into customers and selling them, they had already decided to go to the cloud. They had already decided to use Amazon, or decided to use Microsoft or Google, and they were going to use those respective database products from Microsoft, Google, or Amazon. And so I had to go, not just me, but the entire sales team had to go in and like convince the customer that our product was so much better than the cloud native solution, and convince them that we had to find a champion, build that champion, and really have them almost quit their jobs to take a risk on Snowflake. And I can't tell you how many people almost did, because we would really spend a lot of energy developing these champions, showing them how much work they were doing managing these legacy, even though they were cloud products, but legacy products, versus how it was to use Snowflake, and how much better of a product Snowflake was. So the religion was Snowflake, and it was hard, because you're going door to door, knocking on those doors where people are like, "Well, we're already using Amazon, we're already using Microsoft, we don't want to use you." And oh, by the way, one of the things that Snowflake did is we took ownership of data, and we'll talk a little bit about it more later, about data sharing and stable edges. But what being the owner of that data allows Snowflake to have this network effect, so customers can share data between each other instead of like taking it out and putting it on an FTP server, et cetera, et cetera. That's one of the things that the long-term benefits of what we did was, getting these people to buy in on the religion of Snowflake. And there's all sorts of benefits that came later on, as we had this huge network of customers all on the Snowflake, data cloud.
I mean, Denise, how do you attack that, or how do you support that? So Chris is talking about every customer you face resistance, from day one, and it's hard. You have to overcome that resistance. From a marketing perspective, what did you do? Because you talked about building trust earlier. Yeah. So how do you support that when you have a customer that that Chris and his team, the minute they step through the door to engage a customer, you're going to have to fight an uphill battle?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as a startup, the most important thing you need to do is focus, right? Snowflake had a very clear focus in the early days from an ideal customer profile, right? We didn't try to go out. We understood that some companies are a bit behind from adopting the cloud, right? So we had to go after a segment that was really already in the cloud. Companies that were very, very data intensive, company that had the biggest migraine, like to your point about solving a big migraine. Mm-hmm. These were companies with huge 24/7 migraines, right? So that were hindering their business from growing further. And some of those segments were ad tech companies, right? They were managing a massive amount of data, and they just couldn't, no platform could keep up, with what they needed to do. Also, gaming companies, for instance, right, where they needed analytics, kind of in real time to see where we're losing, one of our customers, right? What keeps, our customers, stay in the game longer, all of that, right? And we solved specific challenges that they had, right? So we started breaking into those segments. We didn't go to the largest companies on the planet in the early days, right? Of course, we wanted to sell into the G2000, but they were not ready for us then. So it was that focus in the early day in terms of like, okay, how do we make, get every ad tech company? How do we get, every gaming company? and then we expanded from there. So it was really about not, again, trying to conquer everything from the beginning. And many of those companies started really co-develop with Snowflake, right? They gave Snowflake some really hard challenges that they had, and Snowflake we didn't, again, solve every challenge that they brought our way, because we knew that some of them wouldn't be the right for a religion, right? In terms of where the vision was for Snowflake. But there were a number of companies that really aligned with the religion, if you will, right? And had some specific hard problems that Snowflake engineers came in then with Chris' team and really developed for them, right? And many of them are still customers of Snowflake, to date. And those leaders at those customers have brought Snowflake into every single company, right, where they have gone. So that focus in the early day was so important. And then we got these champions, right? What we did for them was that they were migraine, they didn't just, get rid of their migraine, right? They were just, thriving as companies. And they carried the religion forward for us. So our marketing essentially became about putting these folks at the forefront of our marketing. And we said, again, we put customers at the center of our marketing and at the forefront, because everyone wants to learn from their peers, right? They don't trust this company called Snowflake, right, with 10 million in revenue back in 2016, but they trust their peers who said that this is the best thing they've ever seen. So really investing in getting those customers to do our job, that was the power of our marketing, and the entire Snowflake brand, right, has been built through customers who, again, got rid of their migraine, essentially.
Yeah, customers that become evangelists. Talk to me a little bit. I want to, because this is interesting. You each came at this from some maybe a slightly different perspective, but one of the central theses of the book, and I want to come back to this now and get you both to talk about it. You write in the book that none of this works, scaling an enterprise software company, especially when you're doing something like selling religion, as you put it, if sales and marketing come from different perspectives and work independently, that it has to be interdependent. You put it as two bodies, one brain. Talk to me about that, Chris. How did you come together and build something that was interdependent, and maybe describe what was, because you had sales experiences before this, so what was different this time?
Yeah, look, so I was there a little bit before Denise, and I was basically running our demand generation programs prior to Denise showing up. And I would get into arguments with people that were in marketing around what the definition of a marketing qualified lead was, and really that's not a good use of my energy. And so when Denise came in, she came in, even though she had been a chief marketing officer in a large organization, she came in and rolled up her sleeves. And I'm a big believer of people that are willing to do the job that they expect others to do. And so I think Denise came in and really showed me that she had no ego, and she was going to go and interview every single sales development rep that we had, every single sales rep we had, every manager on the sales side to diagnose where we were having success and where were we falling down. And then really then helping institute ways for us to get in front of those customers. And so that's the classic, she had me at hello. She basically had me up oh my gosh, you are my customer. And ultimately what you see in organizations that have friction between sales and marketing, because I see that now on the side that I'm at now, is I'm an advisor to a bunch of different startups. And sometimes founders, first of all, a lot of founders have no idea what marketing does. Second of all, they drive friction. And the friction is, look at the scoreboard. And the scoreboard is marketing has generated a whole bunch of leads. And then sales, you're not following up on those leads. And then sales says, well, those leads are terrible leads. And so it's
give me the Glengarry leads.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Glengarry leads, exactly. And so that never happened. So going back to Denise rolling up her sleeves, she understood what was a good lead. And so what she really focused her time and energy on was making sure that we got our sales reps in front of customers. We got our sales reps to have customer stories because customers love Snowflake. And so what she did was all of her marketing efforts from her team's perspective was built on, let's drive a whole bunch of customer examples into prospects' hands. And that was like what she did. And every single sales rep that I hired that came into Snowflake couldn't believe the level of expertise and the awesomeness of the marketing team. They're like, they've never seen anything like this. So in a lot of ways, she made me more credible because I was telling people what a great company it was. I was telling people what a great product we were selling, and then Denise just accentuated it. So that was really it. Is she really came in and said the number one goal for the company is not marketing qualified leads or meetings for my sales team. It's revenue. And really, that's what that was the North Star, and making sure our customers were really happy. And I think we both centered on, let's go hit the numbers, and everything else is going to, fix itself. And when there were problems, there wasn't this like, hey, go to Dad, who was our CEO. It was go to each other and have a direct conversation and tell each other, hey, Denise, you're screwing up here, or you're doing this bad. And there were definite direct conversations that she's had with me and I've had with her, but then we take that feedback and act on that feedback. We weren't like egomaniacs being like, we're never wrong. We were like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll listen, I'll go do my research and I'll go fix that. So I think that was the magic that I felt that we had in our relationship, but I'm sure Denise has more to add to that.
Yeah, I'd love for you to expand on that, Denise. And specifically, I'd love to know, since you had big jobs before this coming into Snowflake, what was very different? Because now you've been at Snowflake for a lot of years. What was so different about scaling Snowflake here compared to what you did previously?
No, I would say a part of kind of the mission we had was we had this, what we called no rep left behind initiative. It was also in the early days, right? I think we had maybe 20, 25 sellers or so. And it's expensive, right? This is infrastructure sales. It's very expensive. And to have sellers that are not productive, right, is a huge cost for a company. And also, if sellers don't sell, they don't make money, and then they will go somewhere else, right? So the focus was about making one seller at a time, but of course, at the same time, successful, and sitting with them and also understanding what does everyone need, right? Because maybe you had a rep who is working on 3 deals at the moment, right? They don't need a lot of new leads at the moment, right? They need to close these 3 things, and that's going to take all their time. So it would be a waste even feeding them with new leads. But then there are new reps who have nothing. So it's really about looking, okay, these 25 people, exactly what kind of nutrition do they need, if you will, right, to be successful? And it wasn't the same sort of for everyone. So it was really about making, again, just like we made one customer really, really super successful at a time, it's also how do we make every rep successful at a time. I enjoyed that part. I loved that time, at Snowflake, right? Every phase of our growth has its kind of different charm, if you will. I mean, I love it here today as well, but it's of course a different scale. But it was really around, again, you can, and also, right, it's so important, and Frank Slootman, our CEO, talked about this a lot. You cannot say that sales is successful just because that the entire team, meets the number, right? It's about how do you get every rep to meet their number. Right? Often in most companies, it's like, okay, well, North America had, APJ had, but maybe Europe is behind. That's not success, right? How do you get every region to meet their target? How do you get every territory, every single rep? So really looking at sales as success is when every rep meets their quota. That's when you have high productivity. Right, that's what you need to aim for. But most companies look at, well, hey, we met our targets. But again, right, there were a lot of reps that didn't make it, and those reps are going to churn. We're going to lose them, right? We're going to have to hire new people. It's so incredibly ineffective. So we looked so much at those productivity numbers, right? I mean, that was a big thing. Chris, maybe you want to talk about that in the board meeting, right? Every quarter, what's the productivity? And based on that, right, we hired more people.
Yeah, it sounds like alignment is that was the key here. Like you're working from the same set of metrics, you're working from the same ideas of what you want to achieve instead of talking about, you put it this way, Chris, if I heard you correctly, a scoreboard of, I have this many leads, but I'm not getting good enough leads, or you're like, instead of that, everybody's focused on revenue. I want to talk about a critical time in the company's history, because you talk about this in the book. As you scale, there's two problems that a lot of enterprise software companies run into, and you both talk about them in the book. The first is competitive threats, and I want to talk about Redshift. The other is getting captured by a large company. And you talk about both of these, like having a roadmap, and then a dominant customer comes in and just dominates the roadmap, and then you are a slave to that customer, or you get absolutely overwhelmed by a giant competitor. So maybe, Chris, I'll kick it to you, dealer's choice, which one of those you want to tackle first here. Maybe Redshift would be more interesting, because you talked about this in Selling Religion. Nobody wanted to talk to you until there's this very funny part of the book. I guess I'm teasing the book a little bit here. You can read this for yourself if you get the book. But where I think you said it was Bob Muglia on stage, and it was a sales meeting, and said something like, "Thank God for Redshift." Do I have that right? Is that right?
It's true. It's true.
Talk to me about that, about where this, like what happened there. Why was that so important to have Redshift as a rival here to compete against?
Yeah, it's a super unique situation. So first of all, Amazon, to make Denise happy, because I'm no longer employed by Snowflake. So to make the Denise happy as the CMO of Snowflake, Amazon is and always has been an amazing partner to Snowflake. So I'll caveat with that. Okay, we were built on top of Amazon, and I really looked at Amazon as a big brother of like what I would only aspire to be as great of a company as Amazon has built. So first of all, I'll say that. Now, when I started in 2013, we had no customers, and Amazon had signed up in about 7 months. They had signed up about 1,000 customers for Redshift in 7 months. And so,
which is also a data cloud. That's a data warehouse in the cloud. So it was like a direct competitor here.
Direct competitor. And so I think a lot of people who were suspect were like, how the heck are you going to go beat out Redshift? Yeah. Like that was like clear. And I had come from years of selling on-premise. I worked for EMC, which is now part of Dell. And so I had been used to selling to on-premise systems. So I go out and I go meet with Fortune 500 customers and telling them what we've built. The example I gave you with a large bank saying, when are you going to put Snowflake into our private data center? And they said never. And I had really two options. I could continue to try to convince the founders to go on-premise and probably lose my job, or find what we call an ideal customer profile. And it turns out that, going back to the religion example, I am not going to go and preach the religion of the cloud. That was Amazon's job. That was Microsoft's job. That was Google's job. They were doing that. That's the religion. I'm just going to make sure that I have the best cloud data warehouse. And so what I would look for, and that's what I started to realize, is the ideal customer profile for us forever was really Amazon customers that were using Redshift. That was like who I look for. So as simple as this sounds, I would go to like Indeed.com, the job board postings, look for people that had Amazon job posts, like they were hiring people with AWS skills as well as Redshift skills. And then I would send introductory emails to those people saying, hey, you're using Redshift. Here's what we've done that's quite different. I'd love to show you what we're doing to get feedback on what we're doing. And, look, if Redshift had been Snowflake, we would have been dead in the water because, ultimately, Snowflake was a superior technology. But Redshift was great because it convinced customers that they could move these enterprise data warehouse workloads, which had traditionally been owned by companies like Teradata and IBM Netezza and HP Vertica, all that were on-premise. And so they got them to kind of think, oh, I can move these workloads to the cloud. And so my job was to just say, we have the best products to help you do that. And that's when actually, initially we felt a fair bit of friction from all the way up to Andy Jassy. But then eventually they started recognizing that ultimately the goal for Amazon was to have customers vacate their data centers, their on-premise data centers. And we were so good at taking on-premise workloads and moving them to AWS that they really embraced the partnership. Even though they had a competitive product in Redshift, they went from like kind of button heads with us for a little bit to becoming like, well, geez, these guys are doing such a great job driving so many other workloads into AWS, then we became a really tight partnership and alignment there, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And because I'll give you some additional air cover here, Chris. I want to make sure I have this right, Denise. You tell me if I have this right. I thought one of the most interesting things when we recommended Snowflake in Rule Breakers, and one of the ways I sort of, we end up doing a risk analysis. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is that Amazon, and I think this is still true, AWS has account executives that are trained on Snowflake, selling Snowflake through AWS. Is that still true?
Yeah. I mean, very much.
I mean, that's impressive, right? That's an incredible turnaround.
But I mean, we co-sell together, right? I mean, most of our co-selling, and then of course there's a lot of transactions that are happening through the AWS, marketplace, right? So, I believe Snowflake is the largest ISV for AWS in the world, right? I mean,
Is that true? The largest independent software vendor for AWS.
I believe so. That we're at least in the top three.
So you are driving quite a bit of business for AWS.
Yeah, and also we drive a lot of it together, right? So we're very aligned, in the field, right? Their reps bring us in, and again, they're also very much they want to give their customers, choice, right? So if they say, hey, we're leaning towards Snowflake, right? They would bring in, our reps into that conversation, and we bring them in. So it's a very, very super strong, partnership, right? You need both of us, right, to succeed. There are a lot of additional products from AWS that you want to use together with Snowflake as well.
I would just add to that is there's a certain amount of gravity around data, and so like when we would bring like material, like major multi-million-dollar workloads to AWS that were running inside of Snowflake on AWS, there's all this other technologies, whether they're business intelligence tools, whether they're AI tools that AWS that are AWS products that touch that data. So as we brought that data into the cloud, it allowed for other workloads that were not Snowflake. They were AWS workloads that were driving a huge amount of revenue. So that's why I think they recognize the partnership could be so good.
I want to come back to you on another piece of this that I think is critical that you managed to navigate through as a company, and then I want to come on to the AI question about where Snowflake is today. But talk to me a bit about how you got around, like as a leading marketing, I'm sure you had a lot of influence and a lot of direction around what the product roadmap is going to look like. How do you end up? You certainly want to make sure that you are scaling up, and once you get past the startup stage and you're scaling and you're getting a bunch of partners, and now you start to get big customers, but that always feels like a double-edged sword. How do you end up building and scaling the company in such a way that you don't get captured by a customer that says, look, I would like to write you a $10 million check tomorrow, but you have to give me an on-premise option. Like, how do you get around that and build a go-to-market engine that allows you to scale but not get captured by a customer like that?
Yeah, and what's unique is, well, our founders, Benoit and Thierry, right? They're incredibly experienced in enterprise database technology, right? So this wasn't, again, they've been in the business for almost 30 years, right, before they built, Snowflake. So they understood these traps you can get into.
Okay.
And they have and still have kind of really core beliefs and principles around Snowflake. One of them is, of course, the extreme ease of use of using Snowflake, right? That's, again, why everyone loves Snowflake, right? So easy to get up and running, get, time to value. So that's a core principle, the ease of use, right? The cohesion around the product. Snowflake is still one product. If we launch a new functionality, you get that's available to all customers immediately, regardless if you're one of the largest companies in the world or a startup, right? So that's a core principle, the cohesion, one product, things around, of course, security, governance, those principles, Snowflake will never kind of budge on. So it's very, very clear, right? The core principles, and if customers have requests that fits within the core, principles and makes sense for a lot of companies, right? Then Snowflake will go ahead and develop those. Just last week, right, we have our customer advisory board meeting here in Menlo Park. We have 30 of our top accounts here. They get a preview into every part of our roadmap. They can vote on things. They will provide feedback, and we're taking that into account. So it's a very, very tight still relationship with customers who are helping shape the roadmap, combined with those core convictions, that the company has. But again, customers are really still at the center of everything here at Snowflake.
So you manage that tension by you give them a vote, but you don't give them a veto.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, there's probably, Chris, there's probably business, right, that we walked away from and then came back to Snowflake, later, right? Because they realized that you guys are kind of right. I got to be on Snowflake, right? So we just had to wait for the business maybe for another 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
I think, Tim, just to the beginnings of Snowflake, the origination of it was, our initial investor wanted to create a Flash-based database because he had helped start Pure Storage, and he interviewed 100 different PhDs in databases, and 99 of them said that's a great idea, and one of them said that's cute, and that one that said it was cute was Benoit, and Benoit's whole theory was, who cares about a Flash-based database? He thought that the cloud had this theoretical unlimited amount of CPUs, and analytics is just very CPU intensive. So his whole premise was, I need a cloud that's ginormous to actually have a platform that can have unlimited analytics. And so it was really contrary to his beliefs that he could actually deploy this in an on-premise environment, because we would get stuck in the old world of being an appliance and all this other stuff, which he's like, that's dead. I don't want to do that. So it was really his and Thierry's conviction around what they were building. But trust me, I tried to get them to spend to do the on-premise thing, and they were pretty hardcore about not doing it.
Well, I find that encouraging, to be honest, because I do want a founding team that has an argument with the status quo. I think that's core sometimes, not always. You can have an argument with the status quo and lose that argument, and the market will tell you that you've lost that argument. But I sometimes think that's interesting. Let's pivot to AI, and as we do that, I want to bring up something that is another core part of the story. And maybe, Denise, if you don't mind, I'll come back to you on this, which was the way the business model works, which is a little bit different, the way the pricing model works. Mm-hmm. So in the AI era, we're hearing this a lot now, that seat-based licensing is dead. We're going to have a bunch of AI-based software, and we're all going to price it according to prompts, according to workflows, according to jobs. And what's interesting to me, and you point this out in the book, that consumption-based pricing was built into Snowflake from the beginning. It's been around for quite some time. And the way that you do it, and I'm going to tell you how I think about it, and you tell me if I have this wrong, is it has a bit of, and this is not meant to denigrate this, but like prepaid cell phone plan kind of, vibe to it, whereby I'm going to buy a bunch of credits, and I'm going to commit because I really think I'm going to use Snowflake a lot. And as I do that, I'm going to draw them down. And there's a built-in incentive here to draw down those credits first. And then once you find a bunch of value, you're going to want to buy a bunch more credits. which I think is super interesting. That's a different consumption-based model. So in the AI era, talk to me about, is this model setting you up for, the AI era? Like what's different, or what needs to be different about Snowflake in the AI era?
No, I think this pricing model is more relevant now than ever. Because also, our pricing model supported the mission of the company, right? The mission was, we're going to help organizations unsilo all the data, make data accessible for everyone that should have access to it, right? In a very governed, secure way, real-time access. A seat model didn't work, right? Because you cannot buy 100,000 seats for everyone in your company. There would be so much unused capacity, right? That's the thing, right? It's like, maybe everyone would want a CRM license, right, in your company, but you can't give them that, right? Because they might only use it once per week, right? But with Snowflake, right, it supported those users who might only needed data on a specific day or whatever it was, right? It truly helped democratize access, right, to data to everyone in your organization. It's going to be the same thing now with AI, right? Again, you're going to have different agents that needs to access all your data, right? If you're going to have a seat model, wouldn't work in that world. And if you look at 10 years ago or longer than that, when we helped unsilo all data to make it accessible to individuals, right? We're doing that now in this agentic era. Because the key thing is, right, you cannot have, it doesn't matter if you have like 100 smart agents in your company. If they're operating on siloed data, right, it doesn't work, right? Snowflake is becoming that cohesive intelligence layer in your company that all your agents operate from. Right. So if I'm sitting in marketing and I'm using sort of a marketing specific agent that still operates on all my intelligence, in my company, right? I don't want to have just an agent that will only access, data from our marketing systems. My agent needs to access all data within a company. And that's kind of why Snowflake customers now have access to high quality governed data, right? Those are the ones who are ahead now today from an AI perspective, right? Because they have all that data ready, for enterprise for AI.
So if I hear you right, tell me if I'm hearing you right here. So it sounds like if data is the food of AI, which is something we talk about here at the Fool, then you want Snowflake to be the data layer that's feeding all of the agents, irrespective of where those agents are running. Is that the positioning here?
Yeah, you will have to use Snowflake, right? And there are a number of important thing here as well. One is the fact, of course, that you can manage this intelligence layer across all the different clouds that you're using. You can run all the models, whether it's OpenAI, Anthropic, directly, right, within your governed data. The thing around governance is going to be so incredibly important, right? Again, just like we as humans wanted to operate on high quality and the truth, right? If you have all these agents being fed with the wrong information, it's going to be a complete chaos. So having that governance intelligence layer for all your enterprise data is absolutely essential for you to build and become an agentic AI-driven enterprise moving forward. Yeah.
All right, Chris, I'm going to come back to you here. Let's end with a couple of measures because again, we have a lot of investors on here, and some of whom are investing in Snowflake, some who haven't yet invested in Snowflake. I want to give you two things. We're going to come back to stable edges, but I would like to run a stat by you that I use, and you tell me whether or not I'm thinking about this correctly. I tend to like to look at, Chris, the incremental year-over-year increase in sales, so new revenue, take revenue from present year, subtract from prior year revenue, and do the same thing for sales and marketing expense. Present year, prior year. And look at what the incremental dollar of sales and marketing expense produces an incremental revenue. Do you think that's a fair way to look at Snowflake, or is there a better metric that I should be looking at?
The only thing that I would add that, to the credit of Sridhar Ramaswamy, the current CEO of Snowflake, that he reinvigorated, which was the core of what we were built on at Snowflake, was new logos. So
new logos, okay.
New customers, because Snowflake, even at this scale, has an incredibly high net retention rate. And so the things that I would pay attention to as an investor is, how many new, like they talk about the Global 2000 ads.
Yep.
And you should think of a Global 2000 ad as a customer that can spend an enormous amount of money, like tens of millions of dollars a year. And like, so in our land of that customer may only be 40K, 50K, 150K. And so there's so much upside, in this journey with that customer, because we are retiring a whole bunch of different legacy platforms onto, a singular platform in Snowflake. So the way that I think about it is, and this is, again, Sridhar has reinvigorated that effort at Snowflake, is there's a whole, sales team just dedicated to opening up new customers. And then it's, of course, it's on the product team to make sure that the customers love the product, to make sure that they're looking at use cases. Stable edges is one of those things that you certainly measure, but to me, it's really around new logo ads and the net retention rate. Those are two really great metrics for investors to look at, because if those things continue to grow, then the revenue has this long run to go, and that's what I would look at from an investor.
Okay. So that does forecast, like, presumably, if you're right about that, margins should go up over time. And in the most recent quarter, we did see some margin improvement. Denise, is there anything, similar question, and then we're going to get to stable edges here. Is there anything that you look at that is like your magic number as on the marketing team that, as an investor, I'd be like, that's something I want to pay attention to?
I mean, I would come back to Chris. It's about, again, driving new customer acquisition. And again, right, those deals are smaller in the beginning. That's the beauty of this pricing model, again, right, is that you can actually start, small and activate a few use cases. And I think our model, again, is even more relevant in this world of AI, right, where companies that want to go in, they're not going to be able to change their entire company right immediately, but they can go in and say, you know what, we're going to start with the finance department and see if we can do, revenue reconciliation, faster with Snowflake and AI, for instance. So we can go in and again by department, right, help them do these things. So yeah, new business is critical, and again, making customers incredibly successful. Those are the things we're focused on.
Okay, so stickiness is a key part of the story here, that Snowflake grows with customers over time. Customers tend to, add to their usage over time. So let's talk about stable edges, which is something members have heard me talk about many, many times. I want to make sure I understand them. So these are data sets in Snowflake that integrate with other Snowflake data sets for a job, for a workflow, right? And so in the most recent quarter, Snowflake reported, I think it was 40%. 40% of customers now have at least one stable edge, sometimes more than that. And I tend to think about these as an indicator of stickiness, that the more data sets a customer will put in Snowflake and then connect to, the more likely it is they're going to stick around. So 2 questions on this for both of you. Either one of you can answer this here. Am I thinking about it right, and am I defining it right?
No, I mean, you're right. And again, it comes back to stable edge essentially is, it could be 2 companies, right, that collaborate on data, together, right? Think about a company like, Nielsen, who provide a lot of watch data and consumer data, for instance, right?
Sure.
A lot of, yes, they're on Snowflake, and then there's one of their customers who is also on Snowflake, right? They would be able, that customer of Nielsen would be able to query the data of Nielsen, right? Just like it was their own data environment, of course, that removes so much friction and headaches and migraine, right? Come back to making things migraine, free, right?
Sure.
A lot of issues happens, right, from a security standpoint, quality, time lost, all that, right? If you have to send a data file to someone, think about when you just can collaborate on data sort of seamlessly, right? So of course that creates, again, that removing the friction creates, of course, a lot of stickiness. And it essentially gets embedded into their business process too.
I'd give you a very specific customer example. Snowflake has a very large mutual fund customer that they forced their data providers to use Snowflake data sharing because they went all in on Snowflake. And the reason they did that is it would take them 4 to 6 weeks for a new data set to come in and get integrated into their data stack prior to Snowflake. And then when they instituted, like, hey, everyone needs to do, if you're going to sell us data, use Snowflake to give it to us. Because that went from 4 to 6 weeks to hours. So like, if you're a data provider trying to break into like one of these large financial services companies and saying, you're a Snowflake customer, great, I can share that data with you and I can give you instant access, versus I have to go through, like as Denise talked about, like all these security processes, I have to put it through an ETL, loading process, all this crazy stuff. None of that has to happen. And so all of a sudden you get instant access and time value there around the data. So I think it's super compelling and part of one of the huge value props that Snowflake brings to the table.
Yeah, and it drives demand because, as Chris said, right, one of these financial services companies will say to their customers, "Hey, you know what? You got to be on Snowflake to do business with us," right? So that generates, demand and leads, for us essentially.
Yeah, there's customers selling for you again, as we talked about earlier. Yes. Well, this is great. I really appreciate you both coming on here. I'm just going to mention the book again is called "Make It Snow: From Zero to Billions, How Snowflake Scaled Its Go-to-Market Organization." Denise Pearson, Chris Degnan, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about this. I'm very interested to see what the next era of scaling looks like at Snowflake. Because I'm an investor, but also as an owner of shares, I think it's an interesting story. So again, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.